Hey, everybody, I'm Kat Margulis, and I am the host of The Power of Story. As a longtime journalist, author, and book coach, I tend to see story everywhere I go. But in recent years, I've had the opportunity to see how story can transform lives and businesses. And that's what I want to explore with you and my guests through the series is how story can help you create the life, the business, and the legacy of your dreams. Today, I have with me, super exciting, Park Howell. Park is known as the world's most industrious storyteller, having grown purpose-driven brands by as much as 600%. He is a 35 plus year veteran of the advertising industry and now consults, teaches, coaches, and speaks internationally to help business, sales, and marketing leaders excel through the stories they tell. He is the host of the popular weekly Business of Story podcast. He's the author of Brand Bewitchery, and he also co-authored The Narrative Gym for Business, a guide to make you a more confident, compelling, and persuasive communicator. Park, thank you so much for being part of The Power Story.
Oh, Kat, thank you so much for having me here. I know I am among many of your extinguished, or is it distinguished storytelling guests. So it's a real honor to be here with you.
Thank you. Thank you. And like, man, I told you before, between your personal and your professional experience and the hundreds, perhaps even thousands of people that you've interviewed for your podcast and your books, I'm not even sure where to begin when it comes to poking around in your brain, but I'm going to start here. Why the hell are you so obsessed with storytelling?
Well, that's a great place to start. And I guess the answer to that, Kat, is every story is about change, is it not? I mean, if you don't have change, which brings conflict into our world, you don't have a story. You just are boring. You're just reciting stuff. And it changed for me when I was running my ad agency. I ran it for 20 years in Phoenix, Arizona. The first 10 years were great, but the second 10 years, not so much. And that's when digital advertising really started coming in and social media. We're talking early 2000s here. And I was flummoxed because what we knew about branding and storytelling for a traditional world was not happening in the digital realm. And in fact, we were all just being bombarded or barfed on, if you will, with more and more noise. And so our brains going, ah. And I went on my change journey to figure out what the hell to do about it because we were flummoxed. I was fortunate. Our middle child, our son Parker, was going to film school at Chapman University in Orange, California at the time. We're talking 2006, graduated 2010. And I asked Parker, I told Parker, I said, when you're done with your books and your lectures and recordings, please send them to me since I'm paying for them. But I want to know, what does Hollywood know about storytelling and to make these young professionals, competitive storytellers in the most competitive storytelling market in the world, LA and Hollywood. That's when I started learning about the hero's journey and these story frameworks and whatever. And I mapped them to business, took them out of the social sciences, the Hollywood world, mapped them to business, and had tremendous success building brand narratives using basically the hero's journey that I boiled down to the 10-step story cycle system. That's what got me going in the story. I was having so much fun doing that, not having any fun running my ad agency, that I pivoted away from the whole ad world. And now, as you said, all I do is consult, teach, coach, and speak on the power of story in leadership, business, marketing, and sales, and just loving it.
I love that. I love that story so much. I love it. And so why, from what you're experiencing, what you're doing now, I love all the spaces that you're doing this in. Why is storytelling important in the world, in business, in leadership, for entrepreneurs?
Yeah. Well, what do you and I and every viewer, every listener here have in common? We're all Homo sapiens. Now, why that matters is essentially we are all storytelling monkeys. Homo sapiens is the only species we know that thinks, plans, organizes, and acts in story. And what I mean by that is think about anything you want tomorrow. Maybe you've been driving past your favorite ice cream store for the last 10 days and you fought off those urges for that Rocky Road chocolate chip mint double cone scoop. But you told yourself today, tomorrow I'm going to reward myself at 3:00 and stop in there. In fact, I'm going to call Kat up and see if she would like to join me too. I haven't seen her in a while, and we're going to have a great time at the ice cream shop. Well, that is a complete and utter fiction because it's happening tomorrow. We are making this up in our mind, and I've got to call Kat and say, I know you're busy producing these your power story segments. You probably don't have time, but I haven't seen you in a while, and we're going to have a blast tomorrow. And here's what I'm going to order. So I share a story with you as to what tomorrow's going to be. I planned it. I organized around story, and now I'm going to act upon story. That is the way stories are the way human beings, Homo sapiens, us storytelling monkeys, make sense out of the madness of being human beings. That's why it is so power in business and in your personal life.
I love that. I love that. Um, and it's ever present. It's all around us. And yet I don't think that many people know about it, that they have this tool and that it's important to have. I'm curious, what's the most common mistake that you see in others make in the land of story?
Yeah. The villain to story is boredom. If you're boring, it means you're not telling a story. You're speaking non-narrative. It means you never get out of exposition or act one. You and your audience to death with boring details. You know, someone once had a famous quote, a story is all about life with all the boring bits taken out. So that's why it works with it so much. Now, what I teach is structure to storytelling. There are lots of folks out there that say, oh, you got to tell a story, tell this kind of story, that kind of story, and this sort of story. But what I have found where people fall down is we all know what a story is. We just don't know how to properly share it. And we tend to go on and on and on and on. That's why everything we begin when we are teaching stories, the very fundamental structure of the and, but, therefore. 3 words, statement of agreement, statement of contradiction that fires up the limbic brain, statement of consequence. What are you going to do about it? It opens a story loop, and then it builds tension, and then it closes the story loop. And our limbic, pattern-seeking, cause and effect, decision-making, buying brain loves that.
Oh, I love it. I love it. That's awesome. Maybe dive into it a tiny bit just for like, I'm connecting the dots, but just for people that this is totally foreign concept for. What does the and, but, therefore mean?
All right. So think about the last party you went to and someone was boring you to death with a story that kept going on and on and on. Means they never got out of and, or they jumped right to the punchline without any setup. And so you're totally lost. The and button, therefore, is a sequence of how you share your content so that you trigger that primal limbic brain of setup, problem, resolution. Right. So here's an example. You want a statement of agreement. You are an executive who communicates and cares. So that's a positive statement of agreement. Yes, that's exactly what I do. But bore. Therefore, tell a story. So you've got a setup, you got a problem, but you're boring. You communicate and you actually care, but you're boring. Therefore, tell a story. Now let's expand that a little bit, Kat. So you are in the C-suite of an emerging healthcare organization. And if you can connect on a deep level with your colleagues, then you'll build the camaraderie you need for success. Statement of agreement, act 1. But you're not connecting. Boom, act 2, here's the problem, punch you in the nose, but you're not connecting because you're an introvert and have not found a way to become comfortable and controlling on the stage. So we've identified what the problem is. We've identified what you want and why it's important, but then we've identified what the problem is, why you don't currently have it. Therefore, own any room by learning the basic story fundamentals of the and, but, and therefore. That is ensured to connect with your audience's limbic brain in under 15 seconds. Something like that. So what I've done is delivered you setup, problem, resolution. Now, what some people will do, which often happens, is look at you're an executive and you're running this big organization and you got 200 employees responding to you or reporting to you, and you want to win those healthcare awards, and you really care about your patients, and you run it, just kind of like, come on, Park, get to the point.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
where the but comes in because it triggers that brain. But here's the problem. Yeah, you're right. Now I've opened up that story loop for you, Kat, and your
Yeah.
brain, your subconscious limbic brain is saying, well, you got to close it. What's the answer? Because if you don't close it, I'm going to close it on you. And it's probably not the story ending you want unless you intentionally close that story loop for me. That's where the therefore comes in.
Yeah. I love it. And that just beautifully illustrates like how it's a part of everything, every pitch, everything we do. It's not just for, traditional storytellers, but that people can see it's situational.
Yeah.
It's, whatever conversations you're having, how powerful it is in all
And
those
what it
spaces.
is too, think about it this way. An and but therefore so short and sweet. It's actually not really a story, but it uses the three forces of story of agreement, contradiction, and consequence. And you can
Mhm.
look at any long form storytelling and you can see it's broken up in act one, agreement, setting the scene, act two, contradiction, but here's where all the action takes place. And therefore, here's act three, the resolution. So what you are doing is playing to that limbic brain of setup, problem, resolution, using that 3-word dynamic in a very short way to capture your audience's attention and get them leaning in. Then you deliver a little anecdotal story that supports your ABT and pays off the premise of that ABT. So I
Yeah.
would say that to you, Kat. We're going to do this. Tomorrow, Kat, I'm going to go to have the ice cream shop, and you and I are going to have a wonderful ice cream. But I imagine you're probably pretty busy and can't make it. Therefore, I want you to take an hour out of your time and take a deep breath and just join me. I'm buying. I'm going to see you there. Right.
I love it.
And
It's
then
so enrolling in
and then
all
you go,
areas
well,
of it.
Park, I'm not sure. Yeah, sounds good. I don't know if I possibly can. Well, Kat, let me tell you about Jimmy. You know Jimmy and how hard he works. Well, last week he and I went and got a hot dog, and he pushed back so much that I had to go and pick up Jimmy at his home. But we ran down to Stan's hot dog stand, and we had the most wonderful time. Little Vienna Beach. He only gave me 45 minutes of his time, but you know what happened after that? Jimmy sent me an email and said, dude, I am so happy you dragged me out of my office because that was one of the funnest, most delicious hot dog I've had in a long time. Thank you. Kat, that's
Love
why
it.
you should join me tomorrow at the ice cream stand.
I'm so enrolled in this because I'm like, how can I use I'm learning new things in this moment. I'm like, I have not used story with my kids. I
Yeah.
should be using story to get them to do stuff I want them to do.
All right, let's build one. Who's your problem child? Who's your problem child? And what is the problem you're dealing with right now with them? I know you love them all the same.
I love it. Yeah, no, I'm totally, it's making me rethink my parenting style. So thank you for this. But you brought something up and I want to jump to this question actually. So you did a really cool TED talk around start looking for your scenes and your story will find you. And that gives me goosebumps each time I hear it. I'd love for you to explain for the audience what you mean by that. But yeah, for people that they've got this burning feeling, they got a story that they want to write, or they're in business, or they're like, yeah, this is great. Thank you for these tools, Park and Kat. But what is even the story I'm telling?
Yeah. Well, that was a theme for TEDx Gilbert in Arizona about 5 years ago, I think. I gave that presentation, and they asked me, they said, Park, I want you to talk to the 20-something young professionals in the audience. That's what the theme was all about their story and how to find their story and that kind of thing. And I thought about that a lot. And the one thing I had heard from similar professionals like that is like, Park, everyone's telling me to tell my story. I don't have a story. I don't know what kind of story to tell. What am I supposed to do? No one wants to hear my story. And that really rang a bell with me, an aha moment. And I said, you know what? Stop looking for your stories and start finding your scenes. And these are the moments in your life. And it could be when from little girl, little boy, up to high school years, up to college, even, where you now are in your early 20s for that audience. Look for that moment in time when everything changed, when something was shared with you that you had this aha moment, this curiosity took you down this rabbit hole, and you start piecing those moments together throughout your life, and you'll see how it informs who you are today as a person and as a professional. And it is a marvelous thing to do as an executive, as a professional up
Mm.
and comer, to when people say, Kat, why do you do what you do? I guarantee you, in under 30 minutes, we could land on 3 impressionable moments in your life that you have not yet connected the dots on, that have an
Mhm.
intersection in your life that inform why you uniquely do what you do. And so that's what the talk was about. Examples of that, and then how do you go and look for these moments in your own life to find them. Give you a quick example. I begin that TEDx with an orange and the story of this lady, the now 97-year-old woman, who had been a nurse her entire life. And when I asked her, why did you become a nurse? And she goes, oh, I was in Wenatchee, Washington, in the hospital waiting for my sister Diane to be born, and I was 4 years old. And I was sitting there, and this nice lady in this white uniform with her nurse hat on came out, sat down, talked to me for a moment, and handed me an orange. And then she got up and walked off. And she said, that little expression of kindness had such an impact on me that after World War II, I went into nursing, became an assistant anesthesiologist, nurse for several years, raised 7 kids, and then went back and volunteered for 30 years until she was 85 years old, all because of that moment when that nurse gave her that orange.
Yeah.
And that woman is my mom, and she's amazing. I was just in Seattle last week.
The talk, I don't remember
97
hearing
years
that.
old. She's as sharp as a tack. She still lives on the same 12-acre ranch home that they raised us 7 kids up in Seattle, Washington. So there's a little moment in time that impacted who she is and why she does what she does.
Yeah.
So for your viewers and listeners, just go find those 1, 2, or 3 moments that really have impacted and informed who you are today. That's
Mm.
where you're going to find your story. Find those scenes, and your story's going to find you.
I love that. I got to do this exercise. Like after all my interviews, I'm like, okay, I got to go do that. I'm gonna have to
Yep.
watch all of these over again and then do everything you guys told me to do. What is the best piece of writing advice you ever received?
Write with vigor. Brevity is vigor.
Ooh, I love that.
Yeah. I got that out of an old copywriting book. And I mean old because I read it like 30, 35 years ago. And I think it was even 20 years old then. But as I read through it, it was great. It was a book on writing for direct mail writing, direct response writing. It had all these great little wisdom tips in there. And that was
Yeah.
the one that has always hung with me. Write with vigor. Brevity is vigor.
I love that. I love that. Um, what's the one thing people can do in their writing and in their storytelling to make the biggest difference for them and their audience?
Find the singular narrative.
Mm.
And Kat, what I mean by that, we all come under that, challenge of, hey, you got to share your story, you got to share your product or your offering, and you're like, you want to be all things to all people. You want to solve as many problems as you possibly can so that you'll become irresistible to your audience. Well, that
Yeah.
is the exact opposite of what you need to do. You need to focus on that singular customer, prospect, audience member that you're speaking to, and then you connect with them. Everybody else is going to come along for the ride, and you'll start connecting with them too. And you're not solving a dozen problems. You're not solving 2 problems. You are solving 1 problem. You can talk about the other things that your product or service does or your story does,
Yeah.
but it's always focused on 1 problem. What was Dorothy's problem in The Wizard of Oz? She
Right.
had a lot of different things going on, from killing the wicked witch, the other wicked witch coming after her, to a charlatan wizard that's not getting. So she had a lot of problems, but what was the one problem that the entire story was hung on?
Getting home.
Getting home. Yeah. What was Luke Skywalker's one problem? He had a lot of misery, but he was out to solve 1 problem.
Who is his father?
Yeah. Yeah. So you look at all these great stories, and they have 1 character. They have a lot of other characters, but they have 1 central character, 1 central protagonist every single time.
Mm.
It's always about 1 person and change in that 1 person's life. So in marketing and sales or book writing or personal development,
Mm.
think of that one person that this story is going to relate to. Have one character in your story. Have one problem that you are building a solution towards, and create a singular narrative. That's what I love about the ABT so much, is when you go through the and, but, therefore exercise, it makes you think about that singular problem you are solving for. In fact, I
Right.
coach people, write down the problem you're solving for first, and then surround it with your statement of agreement. Act one, set up the problem, why it's important, and what your customer wants. But here's the problem I've identified. Therefore, here's how we're going to solve it. That's
Love
the
it.
biggest thing. Find that singular narrative through a singular character that communicates that singular change and how to overcome it.
Oh, that's great advice. I really love that. Um, what story has had the biggest impact on you?
What story? Story or stories? Story.
I'm open.
That's a really great question, Kat. I mean, so many of them. I've never really that sat down to think about that. What story has had the greatest impact on me? You know what? Well, I guess one of the stories that I share a lot because it had a big impact on me, and I'm kind of the central character in it. I hate to say it. But growing up in Seattle, my dad was a civil engineer and he ran a heavy construction company, and they built dams and bridges and were real tunneling experts on top of that. And when we moved out to the place called the Happy H, where my mom still is, my brothers and I had to dig all these fence posts and put them in. It was a little ranchette, 12 acres, but we had cows and horses and all kinds of stuff. And I remember one Wednesday afternoon out there, it's drizzling as Seattle does in the fall, and I'm out with my post hole digger, and I'm being a little whiny guy at age 10 or 11, I don't know. My dad drives it. And my dad, you got to understand, not just a civil engineer, but he grew up in the Depression era in northern North Dakota. They didn't have much. His father lost their lumber yard. His grandmother became a postmaster in Sheldon, North Dakota, a little tiny town there, and that's what helped get them through the Depression. So this guy's a self-made man. Anyways, he pulls in, it's drizzling out, and he comes over in this big, typical Norwegian smile. Hi, boys, how you doing? And I go, Dad, I can't believe I had to be in school all day, and now I got to come home, and I got to do this digging. And he looked at me, and he just said, Park, pick up that shovel, or someone else will. And all he did was turn around and walked off. And that was his way of saying, I get it, but hard work cures all. So, and I've
Yeah.
used that line, and I've thought about that line a lot. And I thought about that story in my life, that little moment in
Yeah.
time, like I was talking about earlier, that it has had such a profound impact on me, because when I wanted to give up, when I was getting, I don't know, lazy, when I just didn't want to do it anymore, I think about pick up that shovel or someone else will. And
Yeah.
so maybe that's a little story I share with you.
I love it. I love it. Um, I know you've kind of touched on this in little places, in different places, but what makes a great story to you?
Well, I would I would rephrase that question. What makes a good story for you to share with an audience?
Oh, I love that question.
From your
Yeah.
because I'm and maybe I'm getting things confused here, but since this is the Power of Story podcast or
Yes.
show, your listeners and viewers want to learn, well, how can I make stories work for me? And one of the
Yeah.
biggest challenges we have is that a story that works for me as the storyteller may not be the story that works for the audience. So really understand your audience, understand what it is you want them to do with this knowledge you are packaging and delivering through the tool of story, and then tell a story that they can relate to, with the protagonist, the central character in that story, that they can empathize with, that they can understand what they want, they can appreciate why they don't currently have it, and then therefore come along on the ride with you when you help them get it. So
Mm.
that's what I would say is, first thing about your audience, because whenever we're telling stories, it's always about we're trying to impact or impress someone else, right? Well, if we just tell it from our point of view without considering our audience is going to feel it immediately, not care, and you're probably going to piss them off more than anything else. You're going to be that bore in the room you want to avoid.
Oh, I love that question. I love that answer. I love that. I'm gonna just stop right there because that's a lot to process and to chew on. Is there anything else you'd like to share with the audience today?
Gosh, I would love my whole mission in life is to get the ABT in everybody's hands because it is so powerful. It's a tool I wish I had learned in third grade. And yet it took me 30 years in the advertising communications world before I found it. I found it through Dr. Randy Olson, a fabulous friend of mine now. And this was back in 2013. He and I wrote the book, The Narrative Gym for Business, which takes you through the ABT. You can get a digital copy of this, I believe, in your show notes, Kat,
Yes.
or go on Amazon. And I think it's all of $6.99. It's a short 75-page guide with a ton of examples in it and can show you how to start using the ABT in your life. I also have a quick online course you can take at businessofstory.com. That's businessofstory.com/ABT. And then the final thing, I say, come on over to my show. Every Monday, I'm sharing story artists from around the world to help you craft and tell compelling stories that sell. I've been doing it for over 7 years. I have, 380 episodes. And I'm very proud, Kat, that FeedSpot named us the #1 storytelling podcast in business for 2022. So love to have you come along and listen to that show as well.
Yeah, thank you, Park. It's a brilliant show. Thank you for pumping out those episodes one after another because there's so much gold there. So thank you for that. Thank you for all of you watching at home. Remember, there's going to be a Power of Story workshop on October 24th. Details on that to come, and more amazing interviews on the way. So thank you, Park, again. Really appreciate you being on the show, and we'll see the rest of you soon. Bye.
Thank you, Kat.